Another special edition of One Soccer Today. 15 minutes as we continue to go coast to coast, bite size, a little nibble of the Canadian Premier League. And today we are talking about Vancouver Island's own Pacific FC. The Tridents started the season. They did not concede a goal for what felt like months. They also weren't really scoring goals, and then it all kind of turned sour. They struggled in the Sailors Sea Derby, Vancouver getting the better of them on multiple occasions and winning the season series against them. Some injuries helping to derail the season. They did turn it around, make that push. They claimed that fifth and final playoff spot, and they even had Emil Gazdoff win the Golden Glove in the Canadian Premier League in 2024. And yet, as we head to the offseason, some questions. We will review and we will look ahead to 2025. But when you think of the top story, Jordan Wilson, from James Merriman's men in 2024, what would that be?
Ali Endam getting injured after 7 games or 6 league games for them was huge. And I'll say this because they didn't concede a goal, coincidentally enough, when he was on the pitch. For me, he would have been a candidate for Defender of the Year. You can't really say if he was going to win it, but candidate for sure. He was exceptional with that left foot. The passes that he made after retirement, I love every game, but there's certain players where you look at and you're like, oh, you can build a team off of that guy. And was that guy. For him to get injured, I won't say that that was the reason why they went on and had a subpar season, but that definitely attributed to the fact that they were a bit, I'd say, stuck in first gear throughout the 2024 season.
Well, it was a horrible match for Pacific. Endom goes down like 40 seconds into the game. Achilles ruptured, done for the season. I think they lost Adonijah Reed 20 minutes later, and there was a third injury before halftime. And I'm not going to say that maybe that was the moment the season turned, but I'm with Jordan. You just wonder what could Pacific have done if they had the 3 healthy center backs. Do they then get to play Endom with TMG, with Juan Quintana, send Kunle Dadaluk, Eric Lajeunesse, or pick your left back and play a back 3? Do they look different? Is the offense a little bit better? It's a great point, Oliver.
The youth.
What was your top story?
Boy.
Youth. My top story, I'm going to go more positive, and I'm going to give it to the savior, Moses Dyer, who did save the season, I think, for Pacific. That's his new nickname, the savior.
He will love to hear that, let me tell you.
Well, he made his first start in Pacific's 20th game of the season, and at that point they'd scored 14 goals that season. They didn't score in that game either. It was a loss away at Forge with the disallowed goals, which you may or may not remember. In the final 8 games after that, they scored 13 to the 14 they'd scored up to that point in 20 games. Dyer scored 4. He contributed to several more, won 2 penalties, which Sonata put away. This guy basically, I think, saved this team from potentially finishing bottom of the table and instead making the playoffs. And what's more, they got him from their biggest rival, right? In one of the most lopsided deals we've ever seen in the CPL, with Saloof going to Vancouver and not making much of an impact, and Moses Dyer coming to Pacific and saving their season. So a great trade they made mid-season, great impact from a player. And just for me, someone who really represented what I think Pacific should be, particularly when they're at home, which is an aggressive team, a physical team, gets in your face, plays high up the pitch, and has a real threat in the attacking third. And he brought all of those things.
Well done,
Gareth Wheeler.
Let's talk about the true story of the season when it comes to Pacific. It's the Canadian Premier League goalkeeper of the year, Emil Gazdoff. This player went from shaky, a player that split goalkeeping duties a season ago as a very young man entering his first season of professional football at this level, and he stole the show. For me, he was the best goalkeeper in the league on the balance of it, especially in the Canadian Championship, where he showed that he could play at another level. This guy is huge. Like, he's an absolute unit, this guy. So he has the profile, and I think he showed the composure. It was the mental jump, that part of his game, that spoke to me the most, because I think there were question marks entering the season, and he answered them very quickly. Unfortunately for him, the end of the season was a weird one, because he got sent off in, what was it, the penultimate game of the season?
Yeah, handball outside the box early.
And then he didn't get back into play. You're playing playoff games, and you're not starting the Canadian Premier League goalkeeper of the year. This wasn't the time to teach a lesson. This was the time to reward a very young goalkeeper with a very high ceiling for the work that he put in over the course of the season. So for me, the Pacific coaching staff simply got it wrong. Gazdoff should have started, should have played, could have maybe being the difference there, but wasn't given the opportunity. That was a really disappointing end. But the brightest light at Pacific this year was their goalkeeper, Emil Gazdov.
Well, just a few days before we taped this episode, Jordan Wilson and I hosted the 2024 CPL Business Awards, Pacific taking home some honors for community impact. And very notably, oh my goodness, I'm not going to talk about the bird that just flew into the window and is stuck. The top season seat member growth by revenue and retention.
Mind his own business.
The magpie's gone. The magpie's okay, I swear. I promise you. Okay. Gathering myself here, but just saying that there was some success off the pitch as well. They are keeping that group of season seat members. They are growing those numbers. But we look ahead to 2025 after a shaky end to the season. What are some of the things that Pacific needs to do to keep those numbers climbing, to keep that passionate purple support going at Starlight Stadium? And let's go to you first, Gareth Wheeler.
They need a clear footballing identity. That's something I think that they've gone away from. Like, they changed who played and where. Let me start this again. They changed how they played and who played where, seemingly each and every game. Once something didn't work, they just go and chop and change. Like the front three were consistently rotated 2 seasons ago. This season, whether it was a front 2, 3, 4, it was like your guess was as good as mine. So they need a foundation, some consistency in the way that they play. And when things don't work out, it doesn't need to be panic stations or dig deep or try to reinvent the wheel here. So I think for this team to move forward, they just need a clear footballing identity and need to be able to stick with it. Remember, this was a team that over 12 games in all competitions through June 19th, I believe, to mid-August, 12 games, he scored 4 goals. 4 goals. There was only one team in Canadian Premier League history that was more futile in front of goal for that period of time, and Jordan Wilson played for that team. So, and he could speak to the frustration that comes along with it. So, not good.
I'd rather not. I'd rather
We'll leave that
let
alone
that
for
time
the
go.
time being.
My hand was shaking all the time, bro. I was nervous. Don't talk to me. Like looking over my shoulder. Yeah.
And like every team in the Canadian Premier League, players out of contract. You wonder who's going to be back from the core, who's going to be added. Cedric Toussaint, Ayman Salouf, TMG, and Kunle Dadaluk, for our understanding,
those
all
are
out
big
of
players
contract this season. There are
TMG.
4 proper Pacific players who may or may not be suiting up in purple next year. So when you think of offseason priorities, Oliver Platt, what is it for you? And by Ayman Salouf, I suppose that also means Moses Dyer is out of contract as well from their respective loans.
Yeah, sign Moses Dyer. That would be a priority for me. TMG, there's a lot of talk around the league about where he might end up. So I think he's someone who's going to be able to consider his options and would be a big loss if they're not able to bring him back. But I think, to touch on what Wheels just said, like, I think the identity for this team is, we've seen it before. We saw it under Pamadou Carr. We saw it in James Merriman's first season. This is a team that at their best, they play fast, they play on the front foot, and they have a massive home advantage. Not this year at all, but they have a massive home advantage that I think leads into that as well. You know, everyone apart from Cavalry in Vancouver has a long trip to get out to Vancouver Island. Run them off the pitch. That's what they did at their best, right? They were a team that was in your face, that was fast-paced, and I think they've lost a lot of that. So that would be the profile player that I think they should be prioritizing. And like I said, I thought Dyer was that type of player who brought a bit of that back.
Jordan Wilson, your biggest offseason priority for them?
You guys both pointed at the glaring situation. And for me, I always speak about the Canadian Premier League and the fact that you have 23 players and you have to get the most out of them. The teams that play in the last game of the season rotate, get a bit of health, but you have enough depth within your squad to go and push. With the recruitment at Pacific FC, I look at Endam going into the season, probably for me being the only player that was threatening. Now, Zanata maybe heated up towards the end of the season, but you look at names of like Moore, Cesare, Ohea, got come into the squad, and you're like, you got to improve it. You have to bring something different. The recruitment has, and I understand you maybe gamble on players because you see their CV and then you meet them. They have to get acclimated to the space. Like it is a gamble trying to build a squad. But we've seen 2 seasons right now of Pacific FC bringing in players, having high expectations, and they didn't come close to living up to it. So is it James Merriman getting the most out of the squad? Is it the players that you're recruiting not living up to the hype? Either way, that place, even playing there at Starlight Stadium, it is tough. Even coming from Toronto, the 5-hour flight, the 3-hour time difference, going and playing that place, You have to make that a fortress. You have to have players that want to run teams off the pitch. Pacific can do. This was a team we talked about in Champions Cup like a few years ago that played attractive football. That people said if there's a team that's gonna beat Forge or Calvary, it would be Pacific. Now for me, they've fallen off. I put 2-3 teams ahead of them before I pick Pacific. They got to pick it up. Recruitment has to be better and get people that are going to wear that badge and do it right.
I think they did have good players. They just decided they're going to park a big purple bus. Like, look, those two can't champ games. Those two can't. Well, they didn't give themselves a chance to score because they were playing so defensive. Those two can't champ games against Atletico Ottawa, they could have played for 5 days and no one would have scored. Yeah, honestly,
the reason
because they parked. It's about mentality. There's good players there. I think they do have players there.
But I don't know. The attacking group before Dye got there, was it good enough? I don't think so.
It wasn't. I understand, like, you want to play part of the bus, and you could always talk with a manager. Are you being safe or whatever it might be? James Merriman looked at a squad and said, "We cannot score, so we're gonna go and defend." There was no.
I would have loved if they played safe. They just parked it. It wasn't safe.
Well, Jordan alludes to
static.
It wasn't very long ago that they dropped 6 in CONCACAF play against Waterhouse of Jamaica, I believe.
Yes.
You find a happy medium from that team and the defensive ability of the team that we saw last year, because they were really good defensively for a large portion of the season. You gotta melt them together.
10 men behind the ball, of course, they're good defensively.
Recipe. So those are the players that are out of contract whose futures are uncertain, but of course the core remains in a large part. And from what we hear, Josh Hurd, who is the captain of the team, is out of contract, but is likely to return or leaning towards returning to continue to lead this Trident's side. But from that group that we know for 100% certainty, Oliver Platt, that will be back, who's the most important player heading into next year?
Well, I don't know for certainty that he will be back because I think there'll be interest in him. But I'm going to go with Emil Gazdov because, number one, he's the goalkeeper of the year. He's a difference maker. I think when he's in form, obviously more so than the situation that happened at the end of the season. But I think he can be a key part of this team. But then also, if he does move on, and like I said, I think there will be suitors. It's really hard to find goalkeepers in this league who are reliable starters week in, week out, right? So that is a big hole, I think, for them to fill if he does move on. And a situation where if he doesn't, you could have the best player in the league at that position.
Jordan Wilson.
I don't think Emil Gazdov will be back. I think someone's going to pluck him and take him because of the profile, the size. Yeah. Like when I saw him next to Craig Forrest at the CPL Awards, I said, when did this happen? Like, when did you gain another 2-3 inches and like fill that? Like, I think, he's ready to go. And I think that's just what happens in the modern game of football. But for me, Sean Young. And he played in a nucleus role. People compared him to a Jabberpour. When I played in 2022, everyone was talking about this young player in Pacific that could really just weather the storm and keep the temperature in the midfield. And I understand that injuries happen and you come out of form. But someone who bleeds for an island, someone who is from their local boy, that I know that is important to Pacific in the back office, of having people that are from that area and that know what that means to play for that club. He has to have a killer season. You have to keep him healthy. Whether that's yoga or Pilates, whether that's a little change in diet. Like, I make little jokes and references to that, but it's just you need him on the pitch because he is someone, when he's playing his best, he can allow other players to go out and do their thing. You need someone like him playing all the time. He needs to at least hit 25 games next year for me.
Does the back office work with the front office? Just inquiring minds want. I'm sorry. Well, Dario Zanata is the most important player. You talk about a local product. He's from Victoria. First season in the Canadian Premier League, and there was an adjustment period, but he did score 5 goals in his final 8 games and looked very much the part. It took him time to settle. Perhaps he just didn't like the summer months because he came from playing in Scotland, a place where Jordan Wilson hates. But famously, there was some sort of adjustment coming back and playing it back at home. So I'll back Zanata to have a breakout campaign next year. I think he's going to be part of the solution. He's not part of the problem.
Sorry, we need to talk about this quickly. What is a breakout season? What does that include? What are we talking about for that? Because I got in trouble for saying 8 goals isn't enough for
double digits.
Gareth Wheeler.
Take us
big
home.
hopes on Dario Zanata for 2025.
If they decide to play attacking football, if they park the bus.
Pacific go on an attack. Come on, Dario. That injection and a reliable number 9 to get the goals going. This has been One Soccer Today, Pacific FC edition. We'll see you again real soon.